Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. University can be a very expensive experience for young people across the world, and millions of people need to take out big loans to afford tuition fees and living expenses. The US government has just announced a plan to forgive some student loan debt. But is this a good idea? Let's discuss this topic while practicing some useful financial vocabulary. You can find the full transcript of today's episode over on the Thinking in English blog. Check out my Instagram page for more content and leave a like, review or rating wherever you are listening right now. Very close to 3,000 ratings on Spotify, so please leave me a 5-star rating over there. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast or over on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Undergraduate. Undergraduate. Related to a university student who has not yet taken a first degree. As in, my undergraduate degree was in history and politics. To afford. To afford. To be able to buy or do something because you have enough money or time. As in, I don't know how he can afford a new car on his salary. Loan. Loan. An amount of money that is borrowed, often from a bank, and has to be paid back. As in, he is trying to get a $50,000 loan to start a business. To owe. To owe. To need to pay or give something to someone because they have lent money to you. As in, I owe James £10. To forgive. To forgive. To allow someone to not have to pay a debt. Such as, should rich countries forgive some of the debts owed by the poorest countries? To take on something. To take on something. For example, to undertake a task or responsibility, especially a difficult one. For example, I took on debt so I could afford university. To pay something off. To pay something off. To pay back money that you owe. As in, we should be able to pay off the debt within 3 years. Disproportionately. Disproportionately. In a way that is too large or too small in relation to something else. For example, the disease disproportionately affects young people. Depending on where you come from, higher education is not necessarily cheap. Of course, in some countries it is free, or just a few $100s a year. I paid £9,000 a year for my undergraduate degree, not including living costs, which is pretty expensive. International students, however, had to spend even more to study the exact same degree and take the same classes. And universities and colleges in the US can charge incredible amounts. A friend of mine starting law school in California is expecting to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next few years. The problem is that not everyone can afford high tuition fees. Not everyone has wealthy parents willing or able to support them through education. And most people are not able to get academic or sporting scholarships. And a lot of universities aren't able to offer scholarships or bursaries at all. So, how can students attend university in this situation? Loans. The answer is loans. Student loans are essential for millions of people around the world, as they allow people to afford tuition fees and pay costs. While I received some scholarships and bursaries as an undergraduate, I still needed to take a lot of loans out, and I am currently in a lot of debt. I don't have a wealthy family, and full scholarships are very rare in the UK. Fortunately, UK student loans are relatively nice, if that is possible. I guess if it's possible for a loan to be nice. The repayment structure is not too strict on graduates, and I don't actually need to pay anything right now as my income level is very low. Please support me on Patreon. However, most of the student loans around the world are not so nice. Especially in the Americas, the rising cost of higher education has pushed people into crippling debt. In 2020, the total amount of student debt owed by Americans was $1.71 trillion, twice the amount of 10 years earlier. Over 40 million Americans have student loan debt, and 40% of graduates owe between $20,000 and $100,000. High level of loan debt can seriously impact the lives of young people just starting their careers. Many of my friends will never be able to pay off their student debt. In fact, most of my peers' monthly repayments only covers the interest increases. And the debt is likely to increase in the future as university becomes more expensive. What should we do about this? Some people believe that governments should forgive some or all existing student loan debt. US President Joe Biden recently announced he would be cancelling up to $20,000 of student debt per person, although it will be a much lower number for most students. Is this the right approach? Should existing student loan debt be cancelled? Let's think about both sides of this argument. Like in my previous debate episodes, I will introduce arguments from proponents and opponents of student loan forgiveness. I want you to listen to my arguments, think in English, and decide for yourself whether you support student loan forgiveness or not. So, should student loan debt be forgiven? Let's start with the yes arguments. Yes, we should forgive student loan debt. First, proponents of forgiving student loan debt believe that the high amount of debt is bad for the economy. Student loan debt reduces spending and makes it harder for new businesses to grow. Business owners and founders struggle with loan repayments and can find it difficult to get business loans if they have high student debt already. With less small businesses, there are less jobs and less spending, and this means lower national income. Moody's Sovereign Risk Group has estimated that US real GDP could be boosted on average by $86 billion to $108 billion per year, with full student debt forgiveness. Student loans also disproportionately affect poorer and minority students. In the US, black students tend to graduate with twice as much debt as similar white students. Minority students, especially those from poorer backgrounds, often need to take on higher levels of debt to attend university. Forgiving debt could help to address issues with racial inequality. Moreover, student loan debt has serious consequences on young people's journey into adulthood. One study suggests that for every $1,000 of student loan debt, American women's chances of getting married decreased by 2%. Another study suggests that every $1,000 of student loan debt lowers the chances of owning a house in the US. People with debt save half the amount for retirement than those people without student loan debt. Choosing to enter college and study should not damage your chances at building a life, buying a home, and getting married. Yet, for poorer students, this is often the reality. No, student loan debt should not be forgiven. On the other hand, there are a lot of people against student loan forgiveness. One of the major arguments used by opponents is that people should be held responsible for their own decisions. While many people see university as an essential or necessary condition to getting a job, the truth is that you don't need to go to college. It's your own choice. A high number of Americans believe loan forgiveness would be unfair to those students without loans or those who have already paid off their debt. In reality, less than 20% of Americans have student loan debt. Why should the government offer to help these people while 80% of the country don't benefit? Forgiving debt would undermine the idea that individuals should be responsible for their own economic decisions. Furthermore, it has been suggested that student loan debt forgiveness disproportionately helps rich graduates. While student loan debt might affect poorer students worse, forgiveness helps rich people more. Why? Well, rich graduates tend to be people with higher levels of debt. For example, lawyers, doctors, they have high debt. They also have high salaries. Any universal forgiveness program would benefit these wealthy individuals. Students from rich families borrow twice as much as students from poor families. Lawyers, doctors, and other similar professions hold around 40% of all student debt in the US. And the top 25% of the wealthy people in the US have 50% of all student loan debt. These are the people who would benefit most from loan forgiveness, people who don't necessarily need it. Loan forgiveness only benefits people who actually went to college. 90% of children from high-income families enter college, compared to just 35% from the poorest families in the US. People who attend college earn more on average than those who don't go to college. And the majority of debt is held by people with master's degrees and PhDs. Surely the government should also be helping those who did not attend college. And finally, loan forgiveness programs do nothing to deal with the main problem: high tuition fees. In the US, there are already multiple different loan forgiveness programs for doctors, nurses, teachers, military members, and more. Yet we still have a debt problem. A real solution would address why students are forced to take out such large loans to study, rather than reduce their levels of debt without tackling the real problem. So here is today's final thought. What do you think? Should student loan debt be forgiven? After listening to both sides of the argument, has your opinion changed? On the one hand, student loan debt negatively impacts the economy, disproportionately affects minority students, and makes marriage and house ownership less likely. On the other hand, it is a personal choice to take out a loan. Debt forgiveness helps rich people the most, and it fails to solve the real problem of high education costs. Personally, I think student loan debt should not be forgiven, but I think we need to completely reform the entire industry of higher education. The incredibly high tuition fees people have to pay to attend college are far too much, and you're putting too much pressure on poor young people. I know it was a big factor in my decision to go to university, the fact that I could get financial assistance from Nottingham University where I went because of my family's income was a really important factor of me going to that university, because I was scared of the amount of debt I was going to have to take on. But what do you think? Should student loan debt be forgiven? How is the situation in your country? Did you need to take out a student loan to study at college? Let me know in the comments on the Thinking in English blog, the comments on Spotify, or send me a message on Instagram. I love hearing from all of you. While you're over on Instagram, leave a like and follow me, and look at some of my content. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to rate me 5 stars, because I want to be the highest rated English language learning podcast in the world. If you're listening on Apple, please write a review. I don't have that many reviews over on Apple, so please go and leave some. There's 3,000 or so on Spotify, but I think only 200 on Apple. So please go and leave me some reviews on Apple. And if you love listening to Thinking in English, make sure to subscribe to the Thinking in English Patreon. It's the best way to support me and to help the podcast keep growing and keep being successful. And in return for your support, you can access our conversation club every Tuesday at 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. UK time, 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. Japan time, and 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. Brazilian time. So work out your own time zones from that, but you can join our conversation club and talk to other English learners, myself, and other qualified English language tutors. You can also get bonus episodes. There's bonus episodes about how I make a Thinking in English episode, vocabulary episodes, tips on writing writing better, lots of different things over there. And you can also have one-on-one conversations with myself if you join the top tier of the Patreon. So thank you all for listening. Make sure to leave ratings and likes and follow me everywhere. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.